The gleaming corridors of the Zephyrian royal palace stretched endlessly in all directions, their crystalline walls reflecting the soft blue glow of bioluminescent panels. Lady Vexara glided through these halls with the practiced grace of nobility, her 6 elegant limbs carrying her silk-draped form past towering windows that offered breathtaking views of the capital city below. Her crystalline eyes, a mark of high breeding among her people, sparkled with barely contained disdain as she observed the various servants scurrying about their duties. As the Queen's personal advisor and a member of the ancient house of Veltar, Vexara had grown accustomed to the reverence shown by the palace staff. The Zephyrians were a proud species, their civilization spanning 3 millennia of unbroken rule across 17 star systems. They valued intellect, refinement, and most importantly, genetic purity. The concept of interacting with lesser species was tolerated only when absolutely necessary for diplomatic or economic purposes. Today, however, something unusual caught her attention. A figure hunched over a maintenance panel in an alcove near the throne room's entrance, wearing the simple gray uniform of custodial staff. What made this sight remarkable was not the work being performed, but the species of the worker. The creature appeared to be human, one of those primitive bipedal beings from a backwater planet that had only recently achieved basic space travel. Vexara's mandibles clicked in amusement as she approached. Humans were considered barely above animals by most civilized species. Their short lifespans, primitive technology, and violent tendencies made them suitable only for the most menial tasks. The fact that one had somehow found employment in the royal palace was both surprising and deeply offensive to her sensibilities. "You there?" she called out, her voice carrying the authoritative tone that came naturally to those born into power. "What are you doing in this section? Surely your kind should be restricted to the lower levels where your presence won't offend the sensibilities of your betters." The human looked up from his work, revealing a weathered face marked by years of labor. His dark eyes held an intelligence that seemed oddly out of place given his station. "Just fixing a relay junction, ma'am," he replied in accented galactic standard, his voice respectful but not subservient. "The power grid's been fluctuating in this sector." Vexara laughed, a sound like tinkling crystal that echoed off the corridor walls. "A human understanding our advanced technology? How amusing. I suppose next you'll tell me you designed these systems yourself." Her laughter grew louder, drawing the attention of passing servants who quickly averted their gazes and hurried past. The man, who wore a simple name tag reading Marcus Chen, returned his attention to the panel without responding to her mockery. His hands moved with surprising dexterity as he manipulated the complex array of quantum circuits and neural pathways that controlled the palace's energy distribution. To Vexara's trained eye, it appeared he actually understood what he was doing, which only served to fuel her amusement further. "Tell me, creature," she continued, circling him like a predator toying with prey, "how did someone of your limited capabilities manage to secure employment in these hallowed halls? Surely it must have been some clerical error, or perhaps an act of charity on the part of someone with more kindness than sense." Marcus glanced up again, this time holding her gaze for a moment longer than was considered appropriate for someone of his station. "I applied for the position and was accepted based on my qualifications," he said simply. "I have experience with power systems, and they needed someone who could work in tight spaces." This response only increased Vexara's mirth. "Qualifications? What qualifications could a human possibly possess that would be relevant to maintaining systems designed by minds far superior to your own?" She gestured grandly at the surrounding architecture. "These palaces were built using principles of engineering that your species won't understand for another 1,000 years. Assuming you survived that long as a civilization." Several other palace staff had begun to gather at a respectful distance, drawn by the unusual spectacle of a high-ranking noble engaging with a maintenance worker. Among them were junior administrators, service coordinators, and even a few minor functionaries from various governmental departments. All watched with a mixture of fascination and discomfort as the scene unfolded. Marcus completed his work on the panel and carefully sealed it shut. The corridor's lighting immediately stabilized, returning to its proper spectrum and intensity. He gathered his tools methodically, ignoring the growing audience. "The repair is complete," he announced to no one in particular. "The system should operate normally now." "How convenient," Vexara sneered. The simple creature has managed to push some buttons and pretend to fix something that was probably working fine to begin with. I'm sure our real engineers will need to redo whatever damage you've caused. She turned to address the assembled crowd. Observe, everyone. This is what happens when we lower our standards and allow primitives to handle sophisticated equipment. The gathered staff shuffled uncomfortably, uncertain how to respond. While many shared their society's general prejudices against humans, few felt comfortable witnessing such open harassment of a fellow worker. The palace had strict protocols about maintaining dignity and professionalism, even when dealing with lower-status employees. Marcus shouldered his tool bag and began walking away, but Vexara wasn't finished with her entertainment. "Wait," she commanded. "I haven't dismissed you yet. Since you're so confident in your abilities, perhaps you could explain to us exactly how you repaired this system. Use small words, of course, so the rest of us can follow your primitive reasoning." For the first time since the encounter began, Marcus showed a flash of emotion. His jaw tightened slightly and his posture straightened. When he turned back to face her, there was something different in his expression, something that made several of the watching staff take an unconscious step backward. The quantum resonance frequency in the primary conduit was phase-shifted, approximately 2.7 degrees out of alignment, with the harmonic dampening field, he said, his voice taking on a crisp technical precision that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than his humble appearance suggested. This created a cascade interference pattern that propagated through the secondary distribution network, causing the fluctuations you've been experiencing for the past 6 days. The corridor fell silent. Vexara's laughter died in her throat as she processed what she had just heard. The explanation was not only technically accurate, but demonstrated a level of understanding that most junior engineers in the palace would struggle to achieve. Furthermore, Marcus continued, the problem originated from a design flaw in the original installation. The harmonic dampening field generator was calibrated for a different atmospheric density. I've implemented a temporary bypass that should hold until a proper recalibration can be performed. The silence stretched longer, becoming increasingly uncomfortable for everyone present. The uncomfortable silence that followed Marcus's technical explanation seemed to stretch for an eternity. Vexara found herself in the unusual position of being at a loss for words, her crystalline eyes darting between the human janitor and the assembled crowd of palace staff. The explanation he had provided was not only accurate, but revealed a depth of understanding that challenged everything she believed about human intelligence. That's impossible, she finally managed, her voice lacking its earlier confidence. No human could possibly understand our quantum engineering principles. You must have memorized those words from somewhere, parroting back phrases you don't truly comprehend. Marcus adjusted the strap of his tool bag and fixed her with a steady gaze. The resonance equations are based on the Velkari principle of harmonic convergence, first proposed by Grand Engineer Thelmox approximately 800 years ago. The principle states that quantum energy streams maintain stability only when their oscillation frequencies align within specific mathematical parameters. When those parameters drift, as they have in this system, the result is the kind of power fluctuation you've been experiencing. Several of the watching staff exchanged glances. Even Vexara, despite her prejudices, recognized the reference to Thelmox, one of the greatest engineering minds in Zephyrian history. His work formed the foundation of their modern power systems, and his principles were taught only in the most advanced engineering academies. Anyone can memorize names and principles, Vexara insisted, though her voice carried less conviction than before. True understanding requires practical application, something your primitive mind could never achieve. Before Marcus could respond, a new voice cut through the tension like a blade. Is there some disturbance here that requires my attention? Every head in the corridor turned toward the source of the voice. Chief Engineer Korthak approached with the measured stride of someone accustomed to command. His imposing form, nearly twice the height of the average Zephyrian, commanded immediate respect. The neural implants that marked him as a master of his craft glowed softly at his temples, processing information at superhuman speeds. Vexara straightened immediately, her earlier confidence returning in the presence of someone who would surely support her position. Chief Engineer, I was just exposing this human's fraudulent claims about understanding our technology. He's been pretending to repair systems he couldn't possibly comprehend. Korthak's compound eyes focused on Marcus, scanning him with the same analytical precision he might apply to a complex engineering problem. "You are the human maintenance worker assigned to Sector 7? "Yes, sir," Marcus replied respectfully. "Marcus Chen, custodial and maintenance staff. I see. And what repair did you perform here today?" Marcus repeated his technical explanation, this time including additional details about the specific measurements he had taken and the adjustments he had made. As he spoke, Korthak's expression grew increasingly thoughtful. "Interesting," the chief engineer mused when Marcus finished. "Your diagnosis aligns with my own preliminary analysis of the power grid anomalies. I had planned to assign a full engineering team to investigate this problem tomorrow." He paused, studying Marcus more intently. "Where did you acquire this knowledge?" Vexera interjected before Marcus could answer. "Surely you're not taking this creature's claims seriously. He's obviously memorized some technical jargon to create the illusion of competence. No human could possibly understand the complexities of our engineering systems." Korthak's attention shifted to her, and there was something cold in his expression that made her take an involuntary step backward. "Lady Vexera, while I appreciate your concern for maintaining standards, I prefer to evaluate competence based on results rather than species prejudice. This human has correctly identified and resolved a problem that had puzzled my junior engineers for nearly a week." The gathered crowd stirred uneasily. Open disagreement between high-ranking officials was rare in the palace, and the implications of what they were witnessing were beginning to sink in. If the chief engineer was suggesting that a human janitor had accomplished something the regular engineering staff could not, it challenged fundamental assumptions about the natural order of things. "But sir," one of the junior administrators ventured, "surely there must be some explanation." "Perhaps he was given instructions by one of your staff. Or maybe he accidentally triggered the correct sequence while attempting something else entirely." They turned his attention to the administrator with the patience of someone accustomed to dealing with limited thinking. "The probability of accidentally performing the precise sequence of adjustments necessary to correct a phase shift harmonic displacement is approximately 1 in 14 million. I find intentional action to be a more plausible explanation." Marcus had remained quiet during this exchange, but now he cleared his throat softly. "If I may, sir, the problem extends beyond this single junction. The phase shift pattern indicates a systemic issue with the primary harmonic calibration. If left uncorrected, you'll likely see similar failures in sectors 4 and 9 within the next 48 hours. This prediction caused another stir among the watching staff. Several pulled out personal communication devices, likely to alert their departments about potential power disruptions. Korthak, meanwhile, was accessing his own advanced diagnostic systems through his neural implants. "Remarkable," he said after a moment. "My preliminary scans confirm your prediction. The harmonic resonance patterns in those sectors show early signs of the same instability." He studied Marcus with undisguised interest. "You haven't answered my earlier question. Where did you acquire this level of technical knowledge?" Vexera watched this exchange with growing alarm. Everything she had believed about the natural superiority of her people was being challenged by a simple maintenance worker. The idea that a human could not only understand their technology but potentially surpass their engineers in diagnostic capability was almost too much to process. "This has gone far enough," she declared, her voice rising with desperation. "I don't care what tricks this creature has learned or what coincidences have occurred. Humans are primitives, barely evolved beyond their animal origins. The very suggestion that one could match the intellectual capabilities of our engineers is not just wrong, it's insulting to everything our civilization represents." Her outburst echoed through the corridor, and for a moment no one spoke. The tension in the air was palpable as everyone present grappled with the implications of what they had witnessed. Some nodded in agreement with Vexara's words, clinging to familiar prejudices. Others looked uncertain, their worldview beginning to crack under the weight of contradictory evidence. Marcus finally spoke, his voice quiet, but carrying clearly in the silence. "Ma'am, I understand that my presence here challenges your expectations, but knowledge doesn't respect species boundaries. The universe operates according to consistent principles, whether you're human, Zephyrian, or any other form of life capable of understanding them." "How dare you presume to lecture me about universal principles?" Vexera snapped. "You're nothing but a janitor, a menial laborer whose only purpose is to clean up after your betters." The fact that you've managed to memorize some technical terms doesn't change your fundamental nature. Perhaps, Marcus replied calmly, but it might change your understanding of what that nature actually is. The news of the strange encounter in the palace corridors spread like quantum fire through the servant quarters and administrative offices. By evening, every member of the palace staff had heard some version of the story about the human janitor, who had supposedly demonstrated technical knowledge that rivaled trained engineers. The reactions varied wildly depending on who was telling the tale and who was listening. In the lower levels where Marcus actually worked, his fellow maintenance staff gathered around him during their meal break, bombarding him with questions. Most were genuinely curious about what had happened, though a few seemed suspicious of the attention he was receiving. "Is it true you made Lady Vexara look foolish in front of the chief engineer?" asked Yilnara, a young Zephyrian who worked in environmental systems. Her compound eyes gleamed with barely suppressed excitement at the thought of nobility being embarrassed. Marcus carefully chewed a bite of the protein ration that constituted dinner for the custodial staff. "I wouldn't put it that way. I just did my job and answered some questions honestly. But the others are saying you knew things that even the senior engineers didn't know," pressed Dexmol, an older maintenance worker whose carapace bore the scars of decades spent crawling through service tunnels. "How is that possible? No offense intended, but your people aren't exactly known for their technical sophistication." "None taken," Marcus replied with a slight smile. "But maybe your people don't know as much about humans as they think they do." This comment sparked a heated discussion among the gathered workers. Some argued that humans were clearly more capable than generally believed, while others insisted that Marcus must be some kind of exceptional individual, not representative of his species as a whole. A few suggested that the entire incident had been exaggerated in the retelling. Meanwhile, in the upper levels of the palace, a very different conversation was taking place. Lady Vexara sat in her private chambers, her elegant form coiled on a resting platform, while she communicated with other members of the nobility through secure channels. Her crystalline eyes blazed with indignation as she recounted the day's events. "The implications are deeply troubling," she transmitted to Lord Kelvash, the Minister of Species Relations. "If we begin accepting that humans possess genuine intelligence comparable to our own, it undermines the entire foundation of our galactic hierarchy. The natural order depends upon each species understanding its proper place." "Surely you're overreacting," came the response, accompanied by the subtle pheromone signatures that indicated mild amusement. "One human displaying unexpected knowledge hardly constitutes a threat to civilization. Perhaps he's simply an anomaly, or perhaps our initial assessments of human capability were incomplete." Vexara's mandibles clicked with frustration. "You didn't see what I saw, Kelvash. This wasn't just memorized information or lucky guesswork. The creature demonstrated genuine understanding of principles that our own junior engineers struggle with. If word of this spreads beyond the palace, it could encourage other species to question their assigned roles in our society. What do you propose we do about it?" "The human should be removed from the palace immediately," Vexara responded without hesitation. "Transfer him to some remote facility where his presence won't continue to challenge established norms. And we should ensure that news of today's incident doesn't spread beyond those who already know." Unfortunately for Vexara's plans, the story had already begun to take on a life of its own. Palace staff talked to friends and family outside the royal complex, who in turn shared the tale with their own social circles. Within hours, the story of the remarkably knowledgeable human janitor had reached the academic districts of the capital city. Professor Quintera, one of the foremost experts on interspecies intelligence at the Royal University, found herself intrigued by the reports she was hearing. As a researcher who had spent decades studying the cognitive capabilities of various species, she knew that current understanding of human intelligence was based on limited and potentially biased observations. The sample size has always been problematic, she explained to her graduate students during an impromptu seminar. "Most humans we encounter are either refugees, laborers, or diplomatic functionaries. We've never had the opportunity to study individuals who might represent the upper ranges of their species' intellectual capacity." One of her students, a brilliant young Zephyrian named Theklos, raised a thoughtful objection. "But Professor, our intelligence assessments are based on standardized metrics that have proven reliable across dozens of species. Surely those measurements can't be completely wrong." Consider this, Quintara replied, her teaching instincts fully engaged. Our standardized tests assume certain cultural and technological baselines. What if human intelligence operates according to different principles than we've accounted for? What if their apparent limitations are actually the result of our measurement methods, rather than their actual capabilities? This question sparked intense debate among the students. Some argued that intelligence was intelligence regardless of species, while others suggested that the professor might be onto something significant. The discussion continued well into the evening, with students volunteering to research historical records of human achievements and reassess them in light of this new possibility. Back in the palace, Chief Engineer Korthak was conducting his own investigation into Marcus's background. What he discovered challenged his assumptions even more than the technical knowledge the human had displayed. According to personnel records, Marcus had been employed at the palace for nearly 2 years, during which time he had quietly resolved numerous technical problems that had been attributed to other causes or simply overlooked. Computer, display maintenance logs for Sector 7 over the past 18 months, Korthak commanded, his neural implants interfacing directly with the palace's data systems. The information that appeared before him was fascinating. There had been dozens of small repairs and adjustments, all attributed to routine maintenance in the official records. But when Korthak analyzed the pattern of these interventions, a clear picture emerged. Many of the problems Marcus had fixed were issues that the regular engineering staff had either missed entirely or scheduled for future attention. Computer, cross-reference these maintenance activities with power efficiency reports for the same period. The correlation was undeniable. Sectors where Marcus worked regularly showed consistently better performance metrics than areas serviced only by the standard engineering teams. The human had been quietly improving the palace's infrastructure for 2 years, and no one had noticed because his contributions had been dismissed as routine custodial work. Korthak found himself facing an uncomfortable truth. Either this individual human possessed remarkable technical abilities, or the Zephyrian engineering establishment had been operating under false assumptions about their own superiority. Given his confidence in his own people's capabilities, he was forced to consider the first possibility seriously. Computer, initiate a comprehensive analysis of all infrastructure improvements implemented by maintenance worker Marcus Chen. I want detailed reports on methodology, results, and long-term impact. As the analysis began, Korthak reflected on the broader implications of what he was discovering. If one human could demonstrate such capability, what did that suggest about human potential in general? How many other misconceptions might their society be operating under? The questions troubled him deeply, not because he opposed new knowledge, but because the answers might require fundamental changes to systems and beliefs that had served their civilization for millennia. Change was never easy, especially when it challenged deeply held assumptions about the nature of reality itself. Little did anyone know that the day's events had set in motion a chain of discoveries that would ultimately reach the highest levels of government, forcing the Zephyrian Empire to reconsider everything they thought they knew about humanity and their place in the galactic community. 3 days after the corridor incident, Chief Engineer Korthak stood before the Royal Council with a datapad containing information that would forever change how the Zephyrian Empire viewed humanity. The Grand Council chamber, with its soaring crystalline arches and bioluminescent panels, had witnessed countless important decisions throughout the Empire's history, but few as potentially revolutionary as what was about to unfold, Your Majesty. Esteemed councilors, Korthak began, his voice carrying the weight of careful analysis, I come before you today with findings that challenge our fundamental understanding of human cognitive capabilities. 3 days ago, I witnessed something that compelled me to conduct a thorough investigation into the performance of our human maintenance staff. Queen Zarthia, whose ancient wisdom had guided the Empire for over 3 centuries, leaned forward on her crystalline throne. Her ethereal form seemed to shimmer with interest as she gestured for him to continue. Proceed, Chief Engineer. Your preliminary report suggested something unusual had occurred. Korthak activated his datapad, projecting holographic displays that filled the air above the council floor. The human known as Marcus Chen has been employed in our palace for 24 months. During that time, he has consistently identified and resolved technical problems that our regular engineering staff either missed or deemed too complex for immediate attention. Murmurs rippled through the assembled councilors. Lord Vectar, the Minister of Defense, spoke first, Surely you're not suggesting that a single human possesses capabilities superior to our trained engineers. I'm suggesting that our assumptions about human limitations may be severely flawed, Korthak replied, manipulating the holographic display to show efficiency charts and performance metrics. Power consumption in sectors maintained by this human has decreased by an average of 12%. Equipment failure rates have dropped by 37%. Most significantly, he has prevented at least 6 potential system failures that could have disrupted critical palace operations. Lady Vexera, who had been granted permission to attend the session, could barely contain her agitation. This is preposterous. You're asking us to believe that a species barely capable of interstellar travel has somehow produced an individual superior to our finest minds. The very idea violates everything we know about evolutionary development and cognitive capacity. Does it? Queen Zarthia's voice carried a note of curiosity that silenced the chamber. Or does it reveal gaps in our knowledge that we have been too proud to acknowledge? She turned her attention back to Korthak. What other evidence have you gathered? The chief engineer activated another section of his presentation. I have discovered that Marcus Chen holds advanced degrees in quantum engineering and theoretical physics from human educational institutions. His academic record indicates achievements that would be considered exceptional even by our standards. Impossible, Lord Kelvash interrupted. Human educational systems are primitive. Their understanding of quantum mechanics is rudimentary at best. That's what I believed as well, Korthak admitted. However, I took the unusual step of actually examining human academic materials rather than relying on second-hand assessments. What I found was startling. Human theoretical physics, while different in approach from our own methods, has achieved remarkable sophistication in certain areas. The holographic display shifted to show comparative equations and theoretical frameworks. Even the counselors, most of whom possessed only basic technical knowledge, could see the complexity and elegance of the mathematical structures being presented. This particular human, Korthak continued, published several papers in human scientific journals that demonstrate novel approaches to problems we consider cutting-edge. His work on harmonic resonance theory actually predicts solutions to engineering challenges that we have yet to encounter. Queen Zarthia studied the displays with the keen intelligence that had made her one of the most effective rulers in Zephyrian history. If this is accurate, why is such an individual working as a janitor rather than serving in a capacity more suited to his abilities? That, Your Majesty, is where our investigation revealed the most troubling findings, Korthak replied gravely. When humans apply for technical positions within our government or major corporations, they are routinely rejected based solely on species prejudice. The assumption that they lack sufficient intelligence to handle complex work means that their actual qualifications are never seriously evaluated. The implications of this statement sent shockwaves through the council chamber. If talented humans were being systematically excluded from positions where they could make meaningful contributions, it represented not just a moral failing, but a significant waste of intellectual resources. Lord Thekmiran, the Minister of Economic Development, was the first to grasp the broader implications. Are you suggesting that we may have overlooked valuable intellectual capital across multiple species based on unfounded assumptions? I'm suggesting that our entire system for evaluating intelligence and capability may be fundamentally flawed, Korthak said bluntly. We have been measuring other species against our own cognitive patterns and dismissing those who think differently as inferior, when they might simply be approaching problems from perspectives we haven't considered. Lady Vexera could no longer remain silent. Your Majesty, I must protest this dangerous line of thinking. The natural hierarchy that governs our society exists for good reason. Each species has evolved to fill specific roles based on their capabilities and limitations. If we begin questioning these fundamental truths, we risk undermining the stability that has maintained peace across our empire for millennia. And if we continue ignoring evidence that contradicts our assumptions, Queen Zarthia replied coolly, we risk stagnation and eventual decline. Tell me, Chief Engineer, what would you recommend based on your findings? Korthak had anticipated this question and prepared his response carefully. I propose a comprehensive reevaluation of our species assessment protocols. We should test individuals based on their actual capabilities, rather than preconceived notions about their species' limitations. Additionally, I recommend that we offer Marcus Chen a position commensurate with his qualifications and observe how he performs in a more challenging environment. You want to promote a janitor to senior engineer? Lord Vector asked incredulously. I want to give a qualified individual the opportunity to contribute at the level of his abilities, Korthak corrected. The fact that we initially assigned him to custodial work says more about our prejudices than it does about his capabilities. The debate that followed was intense and sometimes heated. Conservative counselors argued that changing long-established policies based on a single individual was reckless and potentially dangerous. Progressive voices countered that ignoring evidence of their own mistakes was equally perilous. Queen Zarthia listened to all perspectives before speaking. Chief Engineer Korthak, you will implement a trial program. Marcus Chen will be assigned to work directly with your senior engineering team on a project of significant complexity. We will evaluate his performance objectively and use those results to guide future policy decisions. And if he fails to meet expectations? Lady Vexara asked hopefully. Then we will have learned something valuable about the limits of individual capability versus species norms, the Queen replied. But if he succeeds? She paused, letting the implications hang in the air. If he succeeds, we will need to fundamentally reconsider how we evaluate and utilize the intellectual resources available to our empire. As the council session concluded, Korthak reflected on the magnitude of what they were undertaking. The trial he was about to conduct could either validate millennia of established thinking or force their entire civilization to confront uncomfortable truths about their own limitations and prejudices. Either way, the quiet human janitor who had fixed a power relay 3 days ago had inadvertently triggered a chain of events that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of intelligence, capability, and the true nature of species potential. The senior engineering laboratory of the Royal Palace had never hosted a human before. As Marcus entered the pristine workspace filled with quantum computers, holographic design platforms, and diagnostic equipment worth more than most planetary economies, he felt the weight of dozens of eyes upon him. The assembled team of Zephyrian engineers, mathematicians, and theoretical physicists represented the intellectual elite of their species, and their expressions ranged from skeptical curiosity to barely concealed hostility. Chief Engineer Korthak stood at the center of the room, his neural implants glowing softly as he accessed the project parameters. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, allow me to introduce Marcus Chen, who will be joining our team for the Andromeda Gate project. The Andromeda Gate represented one of the most ambitious engineering undertakings in galactic history. The goal was to create a stable quantum tunnel capable of instantaneous travel to the Andromeda Galaxy, a feat that would require revolutionary advances in spatial manipulation theory and unprecedented precision in quantum field harmonics. Senior Engineer Velkara, whose family had produced master builders for 12 generations, stepped forward with obvious displeasure. Chief Engineer, with all due respect, this project represents the culmination of decades of theoretical work by our finest minds. Surely you cannot be serious about including an untested individual, particularly one from such a limited species. I am entirely serious, Korthak replied firmly. Marcus will be evaluated based on his contributions to the project, just as each of you will be. I suggest we focus on the work, rather than preconceptions about who is qualified to perform it. The project briefing that followed revealed the staggering complexity of the challenge they faced. Creating a stable quantum tunnel across intergalactic distances required solving equations that existed at the very limits of mathematical possibility. The energy requirements alone would necessitate harnessing the output of an entire star, while the spatial distortions involved could potentially tear holes in the fabric of reality itself. As the technical specifications were presented, Marcus listened with intense concentration, occasionally making notes on a simple data pad that looked primitive compared to the advanced neural interfaces used by his colleagues. Several team members exchanged amused glances at his reliance on such basic equipment. The primary challenge, explained Dr. Kel Nara, the project's lead theoretical physicist, lies in maintaining quantum coherence across distances measured in millions of light-years. Our current model suggests that any tunnel of sufficient size would collapse within nanoseconds due to quantum decoherence effects. What about using nested harmonic fields to create stability buffers? Marcus asked quietly. The room fell silent. Dr. Kelnara's compound eyes fixed on him with sudden interest. Nested harmonic fields? Can you elaborate on that concept? Marcus stood and approached one of the holographic displays, his movements careful and respectful. If you layer multiple quantum fields at different harmonic frequencies, each field could potentially stabilize the others through resonance interference. The key would be calculating the precise frequency relationships needed to create constructive rather than destructive interference patterns. He began manipulating the holographic controls, his hands moving with surprising familiarity across the interface. Mathematical equations appeared in the air, complex formulas that described the interaction between multiple quantum fields across vast distances. This is... Dr. Kelnara paused, her neural implants working furiously to process the implications of what she was seeing. This approach could actually work. The mathematics are sound, though incredibly complex. Senior engineer Velkara moved closer to examine Marcus's work, her initial skepticism giving way to grudging interest. The computational requirements for calculating these harmonic relationships would be enormous. Our most advanced quantum computers would need several years to model all the variables. Not necessarily, Marcus replied, continuing to work with the holographic display. If you use recursive approximation algorithms based on fractal mathematics, you can reduce the computational load by several orders of magnitude while maintaining acceptable accuracy levels. The team watched in stunned silence as Marcus outlined a computational approach that none of them had considered. His method was unconventional, drawing on mathematical principles that seemed almost primitive in their simplicity. Yet, when applied to the quantum mechanics involved, they produced elegant solutions to previously intractable problems. How did you develop this approach? Asked Dr. Thelvax, the project's senior mathematician. The fractal mathematics you're using aren't typically applied to quantum field theory. Human mathematical traditions developed differently from yours, Marcus explained. We tend to look for patterns and relationships that might not be obvious from a purely logical perspective. Sometimes unconventional approaches lead to unexpected insights. Over the following hours, the team worked together to refine and test Marcus's theoretical framework. What emerged was a radically new approach to intergalactic travel that combined Zephyrian precision with human intuitive problem-solving. The nested harmonic field concept, when properly implemented, could indeed create the stable quantum tunnels they needed. As the day progressed, something remarkable happened. The initial hostility and skepticism of the team began to give way to genuine collaboration. Marcus's willingness to learn from his colleagues, combined with his unique perspectives on familiar problems, created a dynamic that none of them had experienced before. Your computational methods are fascinating, Dr. Kelnara admitted during a brief break. The way you approach problem solving is so different from our traditional methods, yet somehow it works. Different doesn't mean inferior, Marcus replied with a smile. It just means there might be more than one way to understand the universe. By the end of the first week, the team had made more progress on the Andromeda Gate project than they had achieved in the previous 6 months. Marcus's contributions weren't just supplemental. They were fundamental to the breakthrough they had achieved. His nested harmonic field theory had provided the missing piece they needed to make intergalactic travel theoretically possible. Chief Engineer Korthak reviewed the progress reports with growing amazement. Not only had Marcus proven capable of working at the highest levels of Zephyrian engineering, but his presence had actually elevated the performance of the entire team. The collaborative environment that had emerged was producing results that exceeded all expectations. Word of the project's rapid progress began to spread throughout the palace and beyond. The scientific community buzzed with excitement about the theoretical breakthroughs being achieved, though few knew about the human engineer whose insights had made them possible. Lady Vexara, monitoring these developments with increasing alarm, realized that her worst fears were being confirmed. The human wasn't just competent, he was exceptional. If news of his contributions became widely known, it would fundamentally challenge the social order she had spent her entire life defending. She began to plan more drastic measures to protect what she saw as the natural hierarchy of species. The stakes were too high to allow this dangerous precedent to continue unchallenged. The very foundation of their civilization depended on maintaining the established order, and she was prepared to do whatever was necessary to preserve it. Meanwhile, in the engineering laboratory, Marcus continued his work, unaware that his success was creating as many enemies as admirers. The breakthrough they were approaching would not only revolutionize space travel, but would force the galaxy to confront uncomfortable truths about intelligence, potential, and the dangerous consequences of prejudice disguised as natural law. Lady Vexara's private chambers had become the epicenter of a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of Zephyrian society. Over the past 2 weeks, she had carefully assembled a coalition of conservative nobles, military officers, and religious leaders who shared her conviction that the growing influence of the human engineer represented an existential threat to their civilization. The situation has progressed beyond what any of us anticipated, she addressed the gathered conspirators through encrypted communication channels. This human success on the Andromeda Gate project is being hailed as revolutionary. If we allow this precedent to stand, it will encourage other species to challenge their assigned roles in our society. General Mektor, commander of the Royal Guard, leaned forward with concern etched across his battle-scarred carapace. What do you propose we do? The Queen herself has endorsed this trial, and Chief Engineer Korthak's reports suggest the human is exceeding all expectations, which is precisely why we must act decisively, Vexara replied. I have obtained evidence that suggests this human's knowledge was acquired through unauthorized access to classified Zephyrian databases. If we can prove he is a spy or saboteur, we can eliminate him and discredit everything he has accomplished. High Priest Kelvoth, spiritual leader of the traditional order, added his support with religious fervor. The cosmic balance demands that each species fulfill its designated purpose. When that balance is disrupted, chaos follows. We have a sacred duty to restore the natural order before irreparable damage is done. The evidence Vexara had obtained was carefully fabricated, designed to suggest that Marcus had somehow infiltrated secure systems to steal advanced technical knowledge. She had used her considerable influence to plant false data trails and manipulate security records, creating what appeared to be a compelling case for espionage. Meanwhile, in the engineering laboratory, Marcus and his team were on the verge of their greatest breakthrough yet. The nested harmonic field generators had been successfully tested at small scales, and the results exceeded even their most optimistic projections. The quantum tunnels they were creating remained stable for extended periods, showing no signs of the decoherence effects that had plagued previous attempts. The energy efficiency is remarkable, Dr. Kelnara reported, her excitement barely contained. We're achieving stable portal formation with only 17% of the power requirements our original models predicted. Marcus smiled as he fine-tuned the harmonic resonance calibrations. The fractal mathematics naturally optimize energy distribution. Each nested field layer supports the others, creating a self-reinforcing stability matrix. Senior engineer Velkara, who had initially been his harshest critic, now watched his work with undisguised admiration. I must admit, Marcus, your approach has fundamentally changed how I think about quantum engineering. The intuitive leaps you make often lead to solutions that pure logic alone would never discover. Logic and intuition aren't opposites, Marcus replied thoughtfully. They're complementary tools for understanding reality. Sometimes you need both to see the complete picture. As the team prepared for the final phase of testing, Chief Engineer Korthak arrived with news that would change everything. I've just received word from the Royal Council. They want a full demonstration of the Andromeda Gate technology in 3 days. The Queen herself will be attending, along with representatives from allied species throughout the galaxy. The magnitude of this announcement wasn't lost on anyone. A successful demonstration would establish the Zephyrian Empire as the undisputed leader in interstellar technology, potentially reshaping the balance of power across known space. More importantly for Marcus, it would validate his contributions on the largest possible stage. However, that same evening, Vexara's conspiracy moved into action. Security forces arrived at Marcus's quarters with orders to arrest him on charges of espionage and unauthorized access to classified information. The arrest was carried out quietly, with minimal disruption to avoid alerting the engineering team until morning. When the team arrived at the laboratory the next day to find Marcus absent, Chief Engineer Korthak immediately investigated. What he discovered filled him with rage and determination. The charges against Marcus were clearly fabricated, the evidence obviously planted by someone with high-level access to security systems. This is a deliberate attempt to sabotage the project, he informed Dr. Kelnera and the other senior team members. Someone wants to prevent Marcus from participating in the demonstration, which means they're more afraid of his success than they are respectful of truth. Can we complete the demonstration without him? Asked Senior Engineer Velkara with obvious concern. His understanding of the harmonic field interactions is far beyond any of ours. We can try, Korthak replied grimly, but the probability of success drops significantly without his insights. More importantly, we cannot allow this injustice to stand unchallenged. The chief engineer immediately requested an emergency audience with Queen Zarthia, bringing with him detailed evidence of the conspiracy against Marcus. The Queen's reaction was swift and decisive. She had built her reign on principles of justice and merit, and the idea that members of her own court would fabricate evidence to eliminate someone based on species prejudice was deeply offensive to her. "Release him immediately," she commanded, her ancient authority resonating through the palace. "Furthermore, I want a full investigation into who orchestrated this conspiracy. Anyone found to be involved will face the harshest penalties our law allows." Lady Vexara, realizing that her plot had been discovered, made one final desperate gambit. She appeared before the Queen with several co-conspirators, making an impassioned plea for traditional values and the preservation of social order. "Your Majesty," she declared, her voice filled with conviction, "we acted to protect our civilization from a dangerous precedent. If we accept that humans can match our greatest minds, where does it end? Will we next be told that primitive species should govern themselves? That our natural superiority is merely an illusion?" Queen Zarthia listened to this argument with the patience of centuries, but her response was cutting. "What you call natural superiority, I call willful ignorance. What you call dangerous precedent, I call long overdue recognition of our own limitations and prejudices." She gestured toward the holographic displays that showed the Andromeda Gate project's remarkable progress. "This human engineer has accomplished in weeks what our finest minds struggled with for years. If that threatens your sense of superiority, perhaps the problem lies not with his capabilities, but with your assumptions about your own." As Marcus was released and the conspirators were arrested, the stage was set for a demonstration that would reshape galactic civilization. The Andromeda Gate project had become about much more than interstellar travel. It was now a test of whether advanced societies could overcome their prejudices and recognize intelligence and capability wherever they might be found. The demonstration, scheduled for the following day, would determine not just the future of space travel, but the future of interspecies relations throughout the galaxy. And at the center of it all stood a human engineer, whose quiet competence had exposed the dangerous fallacy of assuming that species determined potential. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Royal Palace had been transformed into an amphitheater of unprecedented importance. Representatives from 17 different species filled the crystalline viewing galleries, their varied forms creating a tapestry of galactic civilization. At the center of the chamber, the Andromeda Gate prototype hummed with barely contained energy, its nested harmonic field generators creating subtle distortions in the space around them. Queen Zarthia occupied her ceremonial throne at the apex of the hall, her ancient wisdom focused intently on the proceedings. Beside her sat the ambassadors of the galaxy's major powers, each understanding that what they were about to witness could fundamentally alter the balance of interstellar relations. Marcus stood with the engineering team at the control station, his simple gray uniform contrasting sharply with the elaborate robes and ceremonial dress of the assembled dignitaries. The irony wasn't lost on him that less than a month ago, he had been invisible to most of these same individuals, dismissed as nothing more than a janitor, whose presence barely registered in their consciousness. Chief Engineer Korthak stepped forward to address the assembly. "Your Majesty, esteemed representatives, today we demonstrate technology that will make instantaneous travel to distant galaxies not just possible, but practical. The breakthrough we have achieved represents a collaborative effort that transcends traditional boundaries of species and expectation. He gestured toward Marcus, his voice carrying clear respect and admiration. The key insights that made this project successful came from engineer Marcus Chen, whose innovative approach to quantum field harmonics revolutionized our understanding of intergalactic space manipulation. A murmur of surprise rippled through the assembled crowd. Many had heard rumors about the human engineer's contributions, but hearing it confirmed at such a formal gathering was something else entirely. In the noble section, several individuals who had initially supported Lady Vexara's conspiracy now looked deeply uncomfortable with their earlier positions. The demonstration will proceed in 3 phases. Korthak continued. First, we will establish a micro-portal to the edge of our galaxy. Second, we will extend that portal to the nearest satellite galaxy. Finally, if all parameters remain stable, we will attempt full connection to the Andromeda galaxy itself. Marcus approached the primary control console, his movements steady, despite the enormous pressure of the moment. As his hands moved across the quantum interface, the harmonic field generators began to synchronize, their frequencies aligning according to the precise mathematical relationships he had discovered. The first phase proceeded flawlessly. A shimmering portal, barely larger than a coin, materialized in the center of the chamber. Through it, the assembled dignitaries could see stars at the galactic edge, their light shifted by the immense distances involved. The portal remained stable for a full minute before Marcus carefully shut it down. Remarkable stability, announced Dr. Kelnara, monitoring the quantum coherence readings. 0 degradation in field integrity throughout the entire test period. The second phase pushed the technology to its theoretical limits. Creating a portal to a satellite galaxy required exponentially more power and precision. As Marcus initiated the sequence, the harmonic generators filled the chamber with a deep, thrumming vibration that seemed to resonate in the bones of every observer. The portal that materialized this time was larger, more complex, showing swirling stars and nebulae from a galaxy millions of light-years away. Several ambassadors stood involuntarily, awed by the sight of cosmic distances collapsed into a simple viewing window. All readings nominal, reported Senior Engineer Velkara, her voice tight with excitement. Power consumption is actually below predicted levels. The nested field configuration is more efficient than our most optimistic calculations suggested. Queen Zarthea leaned forward, her ancient eyes fixed on Marcus as he prepared for the final phase. Engineer Chen, she called out, her voice carrying across the chamber. Are you confident we can safely proceed to full Andromeda connection? Marcus paused, considering the question with the careful thoroughness that had characterized all his work. Your Majesty, the mathematics indicate a 97% probability of success. However, we are pushing into uncharted territory. There's always a small risk of unexpected quantum interactions. And if those interactions occur, the failsafes will shut down the portal immediately. The worst-case scenario would be a temporary disruption of local spacetime, lasting perhaps a few minutes. The Queen nodded approvingly. Proceed, Engineer. Let us make history together. The third phase required every ounce of Marcus's skill and intuition. The Andromeda galaxy was so distant that even light took over 2 million years to reach them. Creating a stable quantum tunnel across such distances pushed their technology to its absolute limits. As the harmonics built to their crescendo, something unexpected happened. The portal that formed was larger and more stable than anything they had achieved in testing. Through it, the assembled dignitaries could see not just distant stars, but what appeared to be artificial structures, signs of advanced civilization in humanity's neighbor galaxy. We're receiving signals, announced the communications officer, his voice filled with amazement. Structured transmissions from the other side of the portal. We're not just looking at another galaxy, we're making contact with its inhabitants. The implications were staggering. The Andromeda Gate hadn't just achieved interstellar travel. It had potentially opened communication with civilizations that had previously been beyond reach. The assembled ambassadors erupted in excited discussion as they realized the magnitude of what they were witnessing. After maintaining the portal for 10 minutes, Marcus carefully initiated the shutdown sequence. As the quantum tunnel collapsed safely, the chamber fell silent except for the residual humming of the cooling generators. Queen Zarthea rose from her throne, her movement commanding absolute attention. What we have witnessed today represents more than a technological achievement. It demonstrates the danger of limiting our understanding based on preconceived notions about ability and potential. Her gaze swept across the assembled representatives, lingering on those who had initially supported the conspiracy against Marcus. Engineer Chen was dismissed by many as merely a janitor, his capabilities overlooked because of prejudices about his species. How many other brilliant minds have we ignored? How much potential have we wasted because we were too proud to look beyond our own assumptions? She turned directly to Marcus, her expression filled with respect and gratitude. Engineer Chen, your contributions to this project have earned you not just recognition, but a position of honor within our scientific community. I hereby appoint you as Director of Intergalactic Engineering, with full authority to lead future exploration projects. The appointment sent shockwaves through the assembly. A human holding such a prestigious position was unprecedented, but the success of the Andromeda Gate made the decision unassailable. As the demonstration concluded and the dignitaries began to file out, many approached Marcus personally to offer congratulations and discuss potential collaborations. The quiet janitor who had once been invisible to these same individuals was now the center of attention, his expertise sought by representatives of civilizations spanning the galaxy. Dr. Kelnara, watching the transformed dynamics with fascination, approached Chief Engineer Korthak with a thoughtful observation. This changes everything, doesn't it? Not just the technology, but how we evaluate intelligence and capability across species. It should, Korthak replied. The question is whether we're wise enough to learn from this experience or whether we'll find new ways to justify old prejudices. As the chamber emptied, Marcus remained at the control station, making final adjustments to the equipment. Queen Zarthea approached him personally, something unprecedented for a ruler of her stature. Tell me, Marcus, she said quietly. What do you hope to accomplish in your new position? Marcus looked up from his work, his expression thoughtful. I'd like to help create a galaxy where intelligence is recognized and valued, regardless of where it comes from. Where a being's contributions matter more than their species' reputation. A worthy goal, the Queen replied, and one that I will support completely. As news of the successful demonstration spread throughout the galaxy, it sparked conversations and debates that would reshape interstellar civilization. The human janitor who had laughed at by Lady Fexera had not only proven his worth but had forced an entire galaxy to confront the dangerous limitations of their own prejudices. The Andromeda Gate stood as more than a portal to distant galaxies. It was a bridge to a future where potential was measured by achievement, rather than assumption, where the true measure of intelligence was not species, but contribution to the greater understanding of the universe itself.